All right. So you say it's been about a week since you've called.
Yep.
How's it going?
It's going well. I've been just on a day to day, just been trying to stay aware in general. Just trying to stay aware of like sensations. I remember in the past you've told me to like try to be aware of what I do with my hands and the sensations in the face. So I've been trying to work with that a little bit more over the past week. Not much sitting meditation, but trying to just be
Uh-huh.
aware throughout the day.
I've noticed that you've used the word try 3 or 4 times in the past couple of sentences.
Okay.
Um, and that I offer you the possibility to become aware of the word try because it has, let us say it this way, it is the victim's favorite word.
Okay.
And the reason that it's the victim's favorite word is because the victim expects to fail. And so he's not actually going to do it, he's just going to try in hope that he gets credit for trying. And so when I heard about that, low back about 1975, I started to make sure that when I use the word try, that I know what I'm saying. That in fact, part of uh, the mindfulness practice, eventually we become aware of our speech. We hear what we're saying, um, monitoring it to make sure that the speech that we have fits in with the speech that is actually under the class of useful, valuable, wholesome, and is noble. So I thought that I would mention that to you so that you eventually will start to pay more attention to the language that you're using. Until these things are pointed out, almost no one understands that this stuff comes out of the deep psychology, that we get into using particular words based upon a mental attitude. And as you change your attitude from that of being a victim into that of being a lion, a winner, that we change our vocabulary also. But I'm pleased, other than the use of that word, I'm pleased to hear because in fact it doesn't sound like you're trying. To me, it sounds like that you're successful. So anyway, continue on.
No, not apart from that. I don't have much to say apart from that. Not much is coming. Not much else is coming to mind.
Mm, okay. Have you reviewed that guided meditation we did last time?
Yeah. I mean, by review, I mean uh, thought, I've remembered about it. Can't pronounce the word I want to say. Thought about it. There we go. But I haven't actually, like I mentioned earlier, I haven't really done any sitting meditation. So that includes I haven't really done the guided meditation either.
Yes, it's available on the internet, on
Right.
YouTube, with all of our other stuff. Uh, well, what do you want to do today?
I don't know. I was thinking maybe. I think it's been a while since we've done an actual Dharma lesson. Something on something related to the Eightfold Path, maybe. I was thinking maybe
All
right
right.
view. I still feel think I have a pretty good idea what wrong view is. I feel like I'm just clouded. I'm just like bathing in it.
All right. Well, the first thing to talk about right view is, in a way, to see how it's so important and fits not only fits in perfectly with the Eightfold Noble Path, but in fact it's the driving force for the Eightfold Noble Path. And that in Sutta number 117, the Buddha talks about that he's going to teach right noble concentration with its supports and requisites. Now, when the Buddha talks about right noble concentration, the problem with the Westerners is they hear the word concentration and probably grab the wrong meaning. Uh, because the actual Pali word samadhi has various meanings, and in this context, he wants to make sure that you know that the samadhi in this case is not a tight or deeply focused, but rather a unification kind of samadhi, a gathering together, so that the individual, um, by practicing the Eightfold Noble Path, is no longer scattered or scatterbrained, but in fact becomes unified. And we talk about it in the sense of the unification of mind. So when the mind is unified through the Eightfold Noble Path, then it becomes right noble concentration with its supports and requisites. And in that regard, right view comes first. Right view precedes everything. Now, right view grows, that there is no one particular view that's right view, but rather there's many different ways of looking at right view, but that the most important quality of it is um, that when it's noble, that it's not selfish. That there are right views that we have that would be selfish right views, and in that regard, there are two kinds of right views. Wrong view is wrong view. That's easy enough. There's no two kinds of wrong view. Wrong view is wrong view because it's painful, it's harmful, it doesn't get us what we want. Um, but right view is of two kinds. One right view is regular right view, and that right view is needed to run society. That in fact you can see that right view, ordinary right view, winds up being the way families operate, the way that a town operates, the way that society operates, and you can see that in the sense of it operating successfully. However, even if a society or a town is operating successfully, everybody in town still suffers. So, ordinary right view is still subject to suffering. It ripens in clinging. And basically, what it is that it also has superstitions built into it. Because some superstitions, we will do things in a certain way, and the way that we're doing those is wholesome, but it's based upon a wrong view or an ordinary right view that's steeped in superstition. And so, in that regard, always right view, ordinary right view, ripens in clinging, is the exact phrase the Buddha talks about. Now, if it's ripening and clinging, that means that it's normally a selfish kind of right view. That we're doing things in order to benefit ourselves. To where supramundane right view is different than that. For one thing, it's not a particular viewpoint other than really remarkably important viewpoints, such as the understanding of cause and effect, that this causes that, and then not a second, but let us say a cosmic clock tick later. That item that was uh, the effect now becomes the cause for the next tick of the clock, and it affects something else. All right, and that clock tick, the next clock tick, that item that used to be the effect becomes the cause. This is kind of a noble way of looking at the way that the world works. It works through a system. This leads to that, leads to that, leads to that. Probably a very clear example of that is what we call the domino effect. But the real dominoes, you've seen them, probably world champions, where they've got thousands of dominoes that do all kinds of things. But it all gets started by one domino being pushed over. And the finger was the cause, and that first domino had the effect of falling. But the falling of that domino became now the cause for hitting the next domino. And the next domino's movement then is the effect of the first domino falling on it. You see where this is going, okay? The mind works exactly like that, like a string of dominoes. So this causes that, causes this, causes that, causes this, causes that. And that's how we get from the general concept of through ignorance, we wind up in suffering. Now, sometimes these cause-effect relationships are a combination, a bit of compoundness. So an example of that is simple arithmetic. You have a 2 and you have a 3, and together they make a 5. Without that 2, the 3 cannot become a 5. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So in that regard, that means that you can take these two things together and they will be the cause for the next effect. So sometimes you don't need one, sometimes you need two of them, but that combination then is going to be the cause that gives the next effect. The reason I'm pointing that out is because ignorance seems to be one of those things that we add to the mix to get a particular effect. And when you don't add ignorance to the mix, then you get a different effect. Okay? So if we have a feeling and that feeling is ignorant, that ignorant feeling will have a particular action associated with it. An example of it, if I like it ignorantly, then I want it. And if I want it ignorantly, then it means I got to have it. And we also make the mistake of saying it must be good. I like it, plus ignorance says it's good. If I don't like it and I'm ignorant, then because I don't like it, I say it's bad. So this is basically what we have to do to understand super mundane right view is that it's based upon a cause and effect relationship of one thing causes the next thing, causes the next thing, causes the next thing, one after another. And in fact, that little formula that I gave you is the sum total of the entire universe. Because something happened, something else happened. And because something else happened, it set off a chain of events that eventually led to the Big Bang, which eventually led to the inflation, which eventually led to star formations, etc., like that. And off it goes. One thing after another after another. You could go so far as to call this law a physical law and call it the law of entropy. The fact that this causes that, and that everything kind of explodes or breaks down because of the complexity of things. Now, what we mean by supramundane right view is that instead of getting hooked up with or hung up on some cause or some effect, we allow the mind to see the sequence of events as it goes by. So in a way, supramundane right view is the ability to see dots and learn how to connect them together so that we can see how things are moving, how they're going. And this is what gives rise to wisdom, is because we can see how things are headed. We can see where things are going based upon the conditions that they're under now. So this is a very important quality, and that's why the Buddha says right view comes first. Now let me give you a very small example of that. And that is, one's right view would say it is better to have the mind free from hindrances than it is to have the mind hindered. Would you say that that would be the right view? Wrong view, it would be then it's okay to let the mind just wander wherever it wants to go. So long as I sit on my cushion for an hour a day, I'll become enlightened. I don't have to do anything about the mind. But once we take on the right view is that the mind is actually more purified by being free from hindrances, then this is a kind of a right view. And that, in fact, is the right view that we need to start to do anapanasati. So I thought that I would mention that one. All right. So right view then becomes the foundation. It's where things get started. Now, the next item on the list is right sati, or to remember. So we've got the right view. The right view is that it's better for the mind to be free from hindrances. So the right sati is that every time that we recognize or remember that the mind is in fact in hindrance, then we're not holding right view. And so we need to take the effort that it takes to come out of the hindrances and come into a mind that's free from hindrances. So one's right effort then is the right effort to clean these hindrances out. But that's a skill to be developed, just like sati is a skill to be developed. All right, so in that regard, right view, right effort, and right mindfulness run as circle around each other. That's the core ingredient. Is right view, right mindfulness, and right effort. Now, right effort, when it's taken, gives results. And the results then affect our attitude. And so the fourth item on the list then is the can-do attitude. I can do this. I can, in fact, clean my mind out. No matter how obstructed the mind is, no matter how much a hindrance is, no matter how bad I feel about Susie slapping me in the face in public, I can throw those thoughts about Susie slapping me in the face in public out of the mind and not think about it. So that's then the success, is that we can throw that stuff out of the mind. And so if you'll notice now, we've already gotten 4 of the Eightfold Noble Path. But at this level, it's still not noble, because the mind is not noble. It's not cleared out yet, but we still need these things at the ordinary level. Ordinary right view is that it's better to have the mind free from hindrances. Sati, ordinary sati is, aha, I can see that. Right effort is also the effort that it takes to be, it takes a kind of an attitude change here also, because we want to be successful, not a victim. Now, the victim, when he recognizes that the mind has wandered away, even though he's got the right view that the mind should, in fact, be free from hindrances, and yet here it is full of hindrances, we say, oh, the mind is a terrible mind. My mind is no good. I can't do this meditation. Maybe the teacher is the wrong teacher. Maybe he's teaching me the wrong way, etc., like that. This is what we mean by doubt. Doubt about the practice, doubt about whether we can do it or not. And that's the normal way that people are going to do it. They're going to have that same attitude because that's the attitude that they've been living their life with. The attitude of a victim. The attitude, well, I'll try, but I don't think that I'm going to be successful at it. So we actually have to start working on this idea of the attitude. The attitude has to be changed from a victim into a winner. So one's right attitude is, I can clean out the mind. One's right attitude is the attitude of success, but it is built not upon wishful thinking or hope, but is built upon evidence. So by actually being able to clean the mind out, you know that you can do it. You've seen yourself do it. The part that has to be worked on is the part about no matter how obstructed the mind is. What we start with is when the mind is a little bit obstructed, I can clean it out. Or when it's quite obstructed, I can clean it out. But eventually, no matter how bad the mind is obstructed, or whether it keeps coming back, that same obstruction keeps coming back, still we can clean it out. And we have that view, and that gives us the attitude, and the attitude then is the attitude of a winner. I can do this. I can take control of the mind. I can, when I remember to do it, get the mind cleaned out and bring myself to a happy, joyful state, free from the hindrances. Okay, so this is exactly what we need to do in our practice, and that we begin to see that this Eightfold Noble Path then becomes kind of a path for the way that we lead our lives. Now, the next part of the path, which we'll talk about later, right action, right speech, and right livelihood, have more to do with when other people are around. But the way that we get started is by going off into seclusion, getting away from it all, and starting to practice this. So in the beginning of the practice, our sila is already perfect. So our morality is already perfect. Because we're not speaking at all, our speech is perfect. Because we're not doing anything at all, our actions are perfect. Because we're not doing anything for livelihood or lifestyle right now, the actions in that regard are perfect already. But later, when we're starting to deal with the world, we have to bring those things back in. But in the beginning, we can say that these four things start to lead us to the unification of mind. And that unification of mind at the beginning level is the unification of mind of that can-do attitude. I can clean these hindrances out. No matter what, I can clean these hindrances out, and I can become free from them. Now, generally, other than looking at the cause-effect relationship, right view doesn't have any real right views. All right, it would be a mundane right view to say Donald Trump is a bad president. But super mundane right view says, well, we don't know. We haven't done a full investigation yet. Once the investigation is done, we still don't know because we don't know the future involvement. An example of that is everybody says it's really terrible about Donald Trump's trade policies now. But we do not know what the outcome of that is going to be. All we know is we don't like it. So this is the concept of supramundane, is to recognize the things that we don't know when we don't know them, and leave it at that, rather than trying to bring it in to right view as a supramundane right view when it's actually just an ordinary right view, because in fact we don't know. The supramundane right view in most cases will be, I don't know, let's investigate, let's keep looking. And so this is what we mean by the faculty or the power of wisdom, is to keep that investigation going. And that's what makes right view then a noble right view, is when it's always has the quality of inspection, has the quality of, well, we're not sure, we haven't come to a conclusion. Or if I have come to a conclusion, don't hold it too strenuously, because things change. So if I come to a conclusion because of based upon certain criteria, maybe some of the criteria has changed, and now my certainty about what I think the conclusion is begins to change. So supramundane right view is very flexible to where ordinary right view is fixed. It's based in a set of rules. It's based in a way of the society works, etc., like that. But it always ripens in clinging. It always winds up in suffering, because it's not noble. When the view is noble, that means that the mind of one who holds a noble right view, the mind itself is noble. And so this is how noble right view operates. And when one's right view is noble, then that makes the whole path noble. Because, for instance, sati, or the ability to remember, is actually not either noble or not noble. But we need the sati. But when the one's right view becomes noble, that's when the mind can actually become unified. Because ordinary right view will actually scatter the mind. All this is good, that's good, etc., like that. But when we have supramundane noble right view, we don't go around saying this is good and this is good. We'll just say both still are subject to investigation. And we don't draw conclusions. So this is the way that we start with the noble right view of things. Once we have that noble right view, we are on the path. But the question is, how do we come to that noble right view? The answer is based upon personality view of who am I? What am I? And so by investigating the Four Noble Truths, to really begin to understand suffering, and most particularly to understand the nature and the cause of suffering, the second noble truth, by fully investigating the second noble truth, we begin to understand I'm not who I thought I was. That in fact, figuring out the second noble truth means that we begin to see this cause and effect relationship that I was talking about, of what's happening in the mind. This happens, and then that happens, and then we have this feeling, and then that happens, and then this happens, and then suffering. That's basically how it goes. And this is called paticca samuppada in the Pali language, said by the Thais, or paticca samuppada if you're in Sri Lanka. Now, what paticca samuppada means is, actually, you can see if you know how to break down the Pali language, the paticca part of it has to do with the actions or the events that are going on. And the Sammupada, the Sam means in this regard that this is what's true, or this is actually what will happen. And the Buddha says it like in this way: with this, paticca, samuppada, this will happen. Without this, this does not happen. All right, so basically, the place that we look at this most importantly is if we are feeling, and the feelings are ignorant, then if I like something, I want it. If I don't like something, I want to get rid of it. If I am having a feeling that, but I'm not sure whether I like it or not, then I become curious. Now, that curiosity, if it's ignorant, will lead to doubt and eventually to fear, confusion, a negative feeling. So we have basically three kinds of feelings. But if any of these three kinds of feelings are wise, and it says, aha, I can see what's going on, then we can make wise choices about those feelings. And then, in fact, almost you could go so far as to say that about half or more of your entire spiritual journey will be dealing with feelings in order to stop dealing with them ignorantly and start making choices about how we feel. But we won't know how to make choices about how we feel unless we already know how we feel. And so a lot of the practice has to do with figuring out how we feel so that we can do something about it. In other words, once we have right view, so that a feeling arises and we become wise about that feeling, in other words, we can see it, or we remember to watch feelings. I see this feeling arise. Now I can take my right effort to change that feeling into a wholesome feeling. So an example of that is that somebody comes to you in anger. Almost in all cases, due to sympathetic vibrations and many things that we'll talk about later, when someone comes in anger, their intention is to make other people angry also. Now, that intention is almost always ignorant. And so if somebody comes to tell you about the bank and how they're angry at the bank, they will probably overgeneralize by saying all banks are bad, or they might inflate or become grandiose saying that I've had this problem 10 times at the bank where they've only had that problem once. But what they're doing is they're trying to get you to be angry too. Well, if you're wise to your feelings, then you do not have to become angry at the bank. Now, one of the ways that happens would be that you just don't have that same bank. So if he's saying how bad Bangkok Bank is, and you say, yeah, but I have Sri Ayutthaya, you're not going to just automatically get angry at Bangkok Bank. And so this is an ordinary kind of thing that we're looking at here. But if you are wise at the point of contact when those feelings arise, then you can choose how you want to feel. Another example, that you've got a child, maybe a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, something like that, and the child is crying and having a tantrum. Almost always the parent will have their own tantrum back. Threaten the child, tell him to shut up, put their hand in the air like they're going to hit the child, all kinds of things. But if the parent is mindful, if they're watching what's going on, when their feelings of anger arise because of they're sharing the feelings with the child, they can say, wait a minute, I don't have to feel like this because the child is angry. I'm an adult. I have the power to bring the child out of his anger. Normally what we do is we push the child further into it, make them adding fear as well. But if we are wise, then we can tease the child. We can get them to smile and laugh again. But that requires that we have to be able to control our own feelings. Well, if we can control our breath, if we can begin to throw hindrances out of the mind and become successful at that, eventually using exactly the same techniques, we can learn to control feelings. And it is by seeing them as they are. And that's what the point of wisdom. So this is one's right view then, right noble view, is to keep track of how are you feeling? What are you feeling? What do you like? What do you not like? Etc. like that. You begin to understand what our feelings are, because if we have feelings that are ignorant, then they'll wind up being harmful. They get angry, I get angry, etc. like that. So, right view then, noble supramundane right view, does not take a particular position. If 3 or 4 or 5 people are in a meeting and they are all there and they're discussing what happened and everybody puts their part in, after that meeting is over, when the people are leaving, some of them on their own, others are in conversation with people who were in the meeting, what we begin to see is that everybody who was in that meeting had a different view of what happened in that meeting. And not only that, but their own views and memories of what happened in that meeting will start to change and modify over time. So one of the things that we have to recognize with right view in that regard is that even though I was in that meeting, I don't know the outcome of that meeting because I'm not sure about how everybody felt in that meeting. That it's going to change, that things are far too complicated for us to believe that we think that we know what happened. So in that regard, we come up with this concept of not sure. My supramundane right view is that I still do not have enough information to come to a firm conclusion. Okay, let me give you a scientific example of that. It has happened to many, many times that one group of scientists will have an experiment and they perform it enough times that they're sure of it, and so they announce it to the world only to be ridiculed strongly. But there's another way of doing it, and that is these researchers, they do the experiment, they do it over and over again, they share that experiment with some of their other buddies at other universities, and they do that experiment over and over and over and over again until they're finally sure that no matter how many times they perform this experiment, it's always going to give exactly the same results. Only then are they ready to publish their results. Okay, so that would be the way that we have to see supramundane right view, is that things need to be tested and tested and tested and tested over and over and over again before we come to a final conclusion about it. And by doing this with yourself, for instance, by being able to test over and over and over again that you can, in fact, clean the hindrances out of the mind, then that means that the doubt becomes less and less. So supramundane right view also has very little doubt built into it, because doubt is based upon a decision that we've made that we no longer trust. But just not being sure or just not knowing and know that we don't know is not doubt. It's not a hindrance. It is liberating, in fact. It is to recognize I do not know the answer to that question. And it's only the lion that can say that. It's the victim who says, oh, I'm supposed to know the answer to that question. Let me take a guess. And if you'll notice, almost all university exams, because it's easy to grade like that, are multiple choice, which invites the students to guess to get answers. And our whole educational system is designed around trying to get students to guess